So I've been using an iPhone every single day since the iPhone 3G. And during these 15 years, there were only 3 iPhone models that truly impressed me. The first was the iPhone 4S with its incredible Retina display. The second was the iPhone 7 Plus, which was the first large form factor iPhone that I've used and also the first with a dual camera module. And the third was of course the iPhone 10, which was the biggest change that the iPhone had ever received. But since the iPhone 10, I haven't really felt that wow factor until now, with the iPhone 15 Pro Max. So here's a couple of things that I've noticed during my first few weeks of use that made it my favorite iPhone that I've ever used. Number one, the battery life. With my previous iPhone, the iPhone 14 Pro, I've had numerous battery life issues. Essentially, if I had a travel day and I used it a ton, my 14 Pro would die on me at around 12 to 1 p.m. And during a normal workday, where I typically use it in the morning, then on my lunch break, and then only when I'm back from work at roughly 6 p.m. or so, I would have 10 to 20% battery life left, meaning that I would have to immediately put it on charge if I had somewhere else to go. With a 15 Pro Max, on an easy day, I end up with about 70% battery life at the end of that day, compared to 10 to 20%. And on a travel day, I literally have not been able to kill it. I recently went to a friend's wedding in Romania, and I took it off the charger at 7 a.m. I used it quite a lot that morning as I was also packing and looking through my lists of what to take. Then I used it a lot during my lunch break again, and then a ton after 5 p.m. when I took the train to London, followed by the plane to Romania. And I've used it to watch videos, read some news, read your comments and reviews on Wallpapers, test Wallpapers for future releases. I also took a bunch of photos and videos during my flight, and most importantly, I even used it as a hotspot for my MacBook Air. And after all of this, it died at 3 a.m. Romanian time, or 1 a.m. UK time. Essentially, 18 hours after I took it off the charger. And sure, I was coming from a 14 Pro that also had a poor battery health, so the upgrades would of course be more noticeable in my case. But even when compared to all the other phones that I had used before, the Z Fold 5, the Pixel Fold, the S23 Ultra, which also had an amazing battery life, the Pixel 7 Pro, and many others, not a single phone has been able to last me until the end of a travel day, until the 15 Pro Max. Now, I have seen a bunch of your comments saying that the battery life is just not as good as the 14 Pro Max, or especially the 13 Pro Max. However, from my experience, the 15 Pro Max's battery life has been incredible. And if we take a look at the number of different battery life tests, it does seem to outperform the 14 Pro Max and the 13 Pro Max there too. Now, if you are planning to get a new iPhone 15 Pro Max, you need to remember that it still does not come with a charger in the box. So that's where our sponsor Ugreen comes in. Ugreen's new Nexode RG30W and RG65W are the best charging companions for your devices. They come with this really cute smart charging display that changes expressions in real time to show you when you are charging or fully charged. Coming in 2 sizes, the RG30 charges the iPhone 15 to 60% in 30 minutes, and the RG65 charges the M2 MacBook Air super fast too. Your charging buddies also come with thermal guard protection, regulating power levels when facing unusually high temperatures to keep you safe. To add to this, their unique design also comes with a flame retardant shell for added durability, while also prolonging their lifespan. They also come with detachable shoe-pin covers to stop them from scratching your other devices on the go. Check them out by using the links below. And now, back to the video. Now, the second thing that really impressed me were the camera improvements. Now, we have done a few detailed camera comparisons in case you want to learn about everything that's new, but to keep it simple for this video, there are 2 big changes that I've immediately noticed. One, the blown out highlights that the iPhone 14s and 13s had, those are now fixed. And 2, the night photos are significantly improved over the 14s, despite the exact same camera hardware. Both changes are really a result of the switch to Smart HDR5 from the old Smart HDR4. I also really love the new 24 megapixel default resolution, as everything looks considerably sharper, despite the file size not actually increasing that much. But what really impressed me about the camera is the portrait mode. Apple improved their portrait mode in a number of ways. For example, they now automatically get taken if your iPhone detects a person or a pet, and then you can readjust the focus point after, which is pretty useful. But what I loved the most about it was just how natural the background blur looked, especially when taking those new 5x portrait mode shots. Like, some of the 5x portrait shots that I've taken were so good that they looked as if they were taken with a dedicated camera. Now, that doesn't mean that I was happy with everything in terms of the camera. The main module still struggles focusing up close, and a lot of the times when I was taking food shots, I had to literally back up and then use the 2x module to zoom in and be able to focus that way. Also, just like the 14 Pro before it, the 15 Pro Max still struggles when taking photos out of an airplane window. Because the airplane windows are usually very thick and the iPhone also uses the LiDAR module to focus, it thinks that it's a solid object and starts focusing on it rather than focusing outside the window. Oftentimes I had to switch to the Headlight app just so that I could manually focus and get some decently looking shots that way. But I guess my biggest disappointment with the iPhone's camera is that the 5x module is just okay. I mean, it's better than the 3x on the 15 Pro and the previous 14 Pros, but it's just marginally better. I was hoping that once Apple finally introduces a periscope module, they would outperform their competition. After all, other manufacturers have been using such modules for the past 3 to 4 years. But to be honest, the 15 Pro Max still cannot compete with the S23 Ultra or even the Pixel 8 Pro in terms of zoom, which is very sad to see, especially considering how long it took Apple to add a periscope module to their phone. Now, one cool thing about this 5x module though, aside from 5x portrait, is that you can also take 5x action mode shots and do these really awesome looking pans that are just crazy stable. I mean, overall, I'm still very impressed with the camera. I just wish that Apple would have given us a better zoom. On a separate note, we've now dropped 2 more packs for our app Wallpapers. First, we have the Nebula Nomad by Losselheim with 10 beautiful 8K wallpapers that showcase different adventures exploring a beautiful Earth-like planet. These are my top 3 wallpapers from Nebula Nomad. And second, we have Peaceful Palettes by Hanane, which is a beautiful abstract pack with these 2D curves that come in 10 striking colors. You can check out our app Wallpapers on iOS and Android, and to celebrate the launch of Wallpapers, we're giving away an iPhone 15 Pro and an iPhone 15. Full details on how to enter both giveaways in the description. The next thing that I really loved about the 15 Pro Max was the size. You see, the last time I used a Pro Max iPhone was back with the iPhone 11 Pro Max. When the 12s launched and they switched to the flat frame, I simply found the Pro Maxes to be very uncomfortable to use. The phones were extremely wide, and the sharp edges were just cutting into my palm, so I simply just stuck with the smaller Pro models. But now, since the 15 Pro Max is narrower and the frame itself is also a bit more rounded, I find it way more comfortable to use, to the point where I don't really feel the need to go back to a smaller Pro model. Also, even though it does require some hand gymnastics to do so, I have actually been able to use my 15 Pro Max with one hand on a number of occasions. Plus, I've also really enjoyed the larger size. The larger display and crazy thin bezels not only make it far more immersive to watch videos on, but typing was also so much better. The wider screen of the 15 Pro Max combined with the autocorrect enhancements in iOS 17 makes it a significantly more comfortable experience to type on. And guess what? I can finally type in multiple languages without having to change the keyboard language, something that I could only do on an Android and when using the Google keyboard before. So yeah, I'm definitely not going back to the smaller Pro models anytime soon. Although I do have to admit, the 15 Pro Max is incredibly chunky with a case on. So I'm still using it caseless like my 14 Pro, and yeah, it does stick out of my jean pockets in almost all the jeans that I have. So yeah, that is something to keep in mind. And because I'm using it caseless and it's also a big phone, yeah, I did drop it. Back facing the floor, straight on a hard floor tile. The good news is that my back hasn't cracked, but I did get my camera lenses a bit damaged, and also the corner of the frame, that one did get scuffed, revealing the raw titanium underneath. The switch to USB Type-C has also been very nice, as now I have a single USB-C cable on my desk that basically charges everything. My only lighting device now are my 2nd gen AirPods Pros. I do hope that Apple gives us an option to exchange the case for the USB-C one for a small fee. Of course, we still don't get a USB-C charger in the box, so you will have to buy a separate one. Some of you have asked me if I had experienced any overheating. I actually haven't, except for when charging, where I did actually get a warning that the charging stopped due to high temperatures, and Connor from my team had the exact same warning too on his 15 Pro. I haven't really had any messages like that since the last update that supposedly addressed the overheating issues. Now, something else that I've noticed was the overall fluidity. My 14 Pro was never slow, but the 15 Pro Max just feels faster and more fluid. And I don't think it's the A17 Pro to thank for this, but rather the extra 2GB of RAM for a total of 8 as opposed to 6 on the 14 Pros. Not only has everything felt more fluid and more responsive, but I haven't really had any apps reload on me like they often did on my 14 Pro. And something that I was not expecting to be a big difference, but in fact it was, were the speakers. Coming from my 14 Pro, the speakers on the 15 Pro Max are a night and day difference. They're considerably louder whilst also being clear. Just listen for yourselves.
You're just like the bad girl, and it's just the best. Easy with the sad girl, so put you to the test. And now she's just a mad girl, laying on your chest. Let her go out there, go up and down there.
Now, if you're coming from a 14 Pro Max, you might not notice a big difference.
You're just like the bad girl, and it's just the best. Easy with the sad girl, so put you to the test. And now she's just a mad girl, laying on your chest. Let her go out there, go up and down there.
But at least in my case, coming from the 14 Pro, the difference was very significant. Something else that I found myself using quite a lot was the new action button. On Android, you can just double tap the power button to quickly launch the camera. On iOS, double tapping the power button brings up Apple Pay. So the only way to launch the cameras up until this point has been to use the display, which is just far slower than pressing a dedicated button. Well, now with the action button, you can set it to pretty much do anything that you want. In my case, of course, I did set it to launch the camera. And for the most part, it did solve my issue of not being able to launch the camera quickly on an iPhone. But I do think that it could be better. For example, I didn't quite like how you have to hold the action button to initiate an action, and there is no other gesture that you can do with it. You can only have one action associated to it. And it's also quite small. So if anything, I would love for Apple to move Apple Pay to the action button and then have a customizable double tap on the power button for things like launching the camera, which of course that button is much easier to press as it's much bigger. Now you can do a ton of cool stuff with the action button if you use Siri shortcuts, and in apps like Halide, you can customize what the action button does inside the app. I've set it to switch between lenses, but you do get a ton of different options there. Quinn Nelson from Snazzy Labs did an amazing video going super in-depth with everything that you can do, with things such as menus or even some button combos. Definitely recommend you give that video a watch. Overall, my experience with the 15 Pro Max has been very positive. I would love to hear your thoughts on the 15 Pro Max too, especially if you're considering upgrading. For me, it's definitely been my favorite iPhone so far. You can check out our detailed camera comparisons between the 15 Pro Max, 14 Pro Max, S23 Ultra, and Pixel 8 Pro. And don't forget about our iPhone 15 and 15 Pro giveaway, details below. And let us know what other iPhone 15 videos you guys want to see next. I'm Daniel, this means ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.